In this video, we're going to look at the functions of the Pathfinder tool, which is extremely useful, a little bit complicated, and honestly there's more features in it than I'll even address. I'm just going to go over the most basic and useful ones, the ones that we typically and consistently will find useful. This is incredibly useful for creating logos, for creating any type of icon. It just gives you a level of control over shape creation that you can't necessarily get just by using the shape tools or the pen tool or something like that. So if I go up to the window menu at the top, these are listed alphabetically and it has all of your functions present. And it shows you with check marks whichever ones you have visible and available. So the Pathfinder is the one that we're going to pull up, and what it should do is it will either dock it over to the side or it'll leave it floating out here. So when you look at this dialog box, you'll find that there's icons for a variety of things. If you hover over them, it will give you a description essentially of what they do. These shape modes at the top are the ones we're going to use right now because they're the simplest. The Pathfinders down here below can be extremely useful, but they're also a little more complicated, and really you can find your way to doing most of the things they do simply by using the shape modes if you do a little bit more work. So just at a basic level, we're going to work with the shape modes, and primarily we're just going to work with the ones right here, these first two, unite and minus front. These are extremely useful. So what the Pathfinder does is it allows you to make changes to the structures of shapes themselves rather than drawing them from scratch. So if I bring out the some shapes here, which what I'll do is pull together an ellipse and this is misbehaving a little bit. We'll just make it dark right now. I'm going to scale this down a little bit. Ellipse and a square, and we're going to see how these interact with each other. So it's important to note also these are on the same layer, and also the ellipse is above the rectangle. So if I just kind of push these overlapping with one another, I can click and drag and select them both, or I can select one, hold shift, and select the other. The first option here is unite. This actually takes two shapes and it merges them together so that you can create unique shapes. It's actually very useful. So now they are literally one and the same. They can't be undone except by using Command Z to go back and walk through that process. So this is really useful for taking especially unique shapes, merging them together so that you get a single cohesive whole that can no longer be spread out or disassembled. It has something of a permanent nature to it. Now another one of these is one that I probably use even more than unite. This is the one that I use the most. If I select both of these and I use minus front, it's a very literal result from that name. It takes the object that's up front, that's the highest in the hierarchy, that's above the square in this case, and it literally cuts through it, subtracts it from the square. So if I use that, it takes it and it just cuts through it. I like to think of it in very physical terms. You put that one above it and you literally just force it through and it cuts off that piece. It shears away whatever it was covering previously. Now this has tons of uses. So I mean, if you're just trying to create something as simple as a circle within a square, you can use the minus front option. The important thing to remember is that it has to be up front, because if I was, say, want to take a corner out of the circle, I'd have to rearrange these within the layer by clicking, dragging, rearrange, so that that's up front, and then use it to cut piece out of that circle. This doesn't become nearly as important when you're working with Unite because it takes both shapes and it sticks them together. But when you're using one to cut through, you have to think a lot about the order that they're in. Now the other shape modes that you have up here are things like taking the intersection between the two, and that's the only thing that's left, or removing the intersection and then merging the two shapes together. So again, you probably won't use those as much, but basically unite and minus front, which you can think of in terms of add and subtract, those are the two that you'll find using most often with the Pathfinder when creating icons, logos, or really just about anything that uses basic shapes.